this concept of the masculine and feminine has been part of my unfolding throughout the whole process. And it's been more than a concept, it's been the experience of that duality on the inside in a way that's not in opposition, but in two parts of the whole, in a dynamic play. And that the union of the masculine and feminine, all these different levels, in my experience, has continued to bring forth a deeper and deeper awakening and integration. And ultimately, they can't be separated from each other, right? Ultimately, it's all just one consciousness. But in this gorgeous display, these two parts appear and dance, and in their union create. Speaking from this embodied union of this masculine and feminine, in that ecstatic union, the byproduct is the fullness, the full presence of being. Everything is this byproduct of this ecstatic union. In the beginning, the first realization of this union was experiencing the mind as more, in my experience, more reflective of the masculine, and the emotional body being more reflective of the feminine. And that in that initial union, there was a realization that there had been a split of the two being lived, that the mind was separate from the embodiment and was observing and protecting the emotional reality. And so internally there was a sense of past and future, that the mind was protecting the emotional body in relation to that, the past and the future. And in that recognition that these two were separate, there was an experiment played out of union. What happens if the mind and the emotions come into union? Because the emotions were being protected and held back, and the mind was strategizing, navigating in a way that it seemed wise. It thought itself, it felt like a wise thing of protection. And so in this initial experiment, there was a curiosity of wondering what would happen if they came together. And the first place I learned that coming together was learning shiatsu and being told to find a yin spot and a yang spot in a meridian and put your thumb on both and to breathe. And in doing that, with my eyes closed, the thumbs came into the same location. They hadn't moved on the meridian. They let go of time, space, reality, came into oneness, and the meridian balanced itself. And the yin and yang spot disappeared, and there was wholeness and evenness. And so it was that same application internally. There seems to be an apparent too. What happens if consciousness surrenders where they're one? And so in doing that, the past and the future disappeared. There was resting as full presence with the union of the mind and the heart, the mind and the body, the mind and the emotions. And a realization that the system is created, we're made in such a way to process experience. And in that separation, it slows down the processing. There's a divine perfection in slowing down processing. Some things are too intense to process in a nanosecond. So there's nothing wrong with that patterning. But in terms of awakening, there is an inner union that reveals a deeper perspective, a deeper reality. So for me, in this unfolding, opening through each of these different layers of consciousness, I'm going to do a little mapping here. The way it has unfolded for me is that, and some of you have heard, most of you heard this before, that the individuated sense of self opens to the oneness of that whole plane, and then opens as oneness. And so in this human trajectory, the masculine, feminine perspective was the masculine, feminine reflection was the mind and the emotional body, and those coming into union, and then also opening through the oneness of the plane. After that, then my experience has been an opening to the next level of consciousness, the next plane, discovering an overarching masculine and feminine that then also come into union. And then there's oneness in the plane. And then the sense of self opens up to the next level of consciousness as an individual lens, recognizes itself, the overarching masculine and feminine coming into union, opening through the oneness of the plane, and continues. So this has been an unfolding, and is why one of the reasons I was drawn to share the retreat in this way, that it's been a inner revealing that has been profoundly useful in terms of navigating the inner unfolding. Throughout this process, there has also been deep longing for the masculine because of having been single through much of this. And so, in surrendering through any emotional material that would arise, in surrendering through longing and surrendering through it backwards, not longing outward for what is wanted, but following longing as the golden path back to its arising point, and discovering that union, that draw for union, as a divine function of consciousness, for the two parts to come into one, to propel consciousness into its ever unfolding self-discovery. So we are this living mystery. And in my experience so far, there are some things that are consistent. And this overarching masculine feminine has been consistent. A singular I am is consistent. An individuated aspect that is also simultaneously the oneness is consistent. And the continual self-discovery that never can see from which it arises is consistent. And so that sense of self, the individuated aspect that surrenders through into oneness, discovers it's the same I am that was peering through the individuated lens and sees the totality. And when that awareness is recognized, that awareness then also recognizes it can't see from which it arises from. and in the surrendering and the inner draw in perfect divine timing to open to what is behind that one can't see. So far, when that sense of self surrenders itself completely to open to the larger encompassing lens, to then see where it couldn't see before, it discovers that it too, same I am, can't see where it arises from. It's just, so this is also consistent so far in my experience. So this play of the masculine feminine, right? There's this just incredible play in all these different directions, the expression of that. And it's not a rule, it's not I don't know, it's more an observation that's come forward that seems to be consistent. And the awareness and understanding of that here has been useful in the continual unfolding. And in the integration and union and the steadfastness of that, or the sustained union of that in these different dimensional bodies, incrementally or exponentially, both, creates, or the byproduct of that is this deeper bliss. There's this first level of contentment and ease of everything being fine. And then next layers of a deeper ecstatic satisfaction of this scintillating manifestation of all substance, all form being the result of this divine masculine feminine union. Everything is a byproduct of that. And then as that continues to stabilize here, it changes the substance of the flesh. It changes the substance of form, because there's a more grounded, stable integration of that union, which then just produces these higher or more refined frequencies of being, which then transforms flesh. And this also tends to the embodiment, that meditating is not a transcendent thing that gets you out of this reality. For me, it's an embodied exquisiteness that opens you in the harmony and oneness and the bliss of being, where you're not separate from this. So there's in my experience, a embodied, grounded presence of being, where the light that you are shines brighter in through this level of frequency. I mean, there's so many rich details for the interplay in human relationship and exchange in this deepening harmony on the inside with these aspects. Ultimately, one can't separate out what's masculine and what's feminine in that wholeness. You know, in that integration, is gentleness strong, or is strength gentle? Both are true. One of the other impulses in this concept, this framing, and was also about integrating into daily life and the communicating and the functioning. And as these aspects in oneself come into harmony and there's greater union and balance, the way we interface with the world changes.